From the 70s, Hollywood engaged profoundly in the ET issue, knowing that there was a growing interest in the general public for these topics. The popular movies also had the effect of making people more familiar with the thought of a widely inhabited universe beyond our own planet system. In the 90s, people started recording their observations with the new handy camcorders. Today, thousands of UFO clips are posted on YouTube. But unfortunately, with the sophisticated animation tools now available on home PCs, it's almost impossible to tell the real from the fake. So this has made both video and digital stills documentation less reliable as evidence or proof of sightings. But in spite of this growing interest in the subject, the main news media have left the UFO phenomenon almost untouched.
In terms of mainstream news coverage, this topic is not taken seriously. It's basically a non-topic. So how is that so? Here's how. It requires an understanding of the relationship between most of the mainstream news media and global intelligence communities. So what that says, that doesn't mean that the CIA controlled everything, but that you have to understand the media acts in certain choke points. So for example, a UFO sighting might get local news coverage, but that doesn't mean that it gets covered on the wire services. That's a very different situation altogether. And skeptics will argue, well, this phenomenon's so big it would have been covered, but really what that betrays is a lack of understanding of how news media has been related to intelligence communities around the world for decades.
And I call upon our government to open up like other governments have, and you will hear about that this morning. Like the
when CNN covered a press conference in Washington, D.C. in 2009, where Dr. Edgar Mitchell encouraged U.S. government to release its UFO files, the hope was that the issue finally was given serious news coverage.
Former Apollo astronaut Edgar Mitchell, the sixth man to walk on the moon, told the National Press Club he's convinced.
But there isn't convincing proof that's going to convince the entire world at this point.
That is correct. That is what we're trying to open up.
We're about to go out and do our little hoax.
But CNN chose to let two boys with air balloons have just as much time in the report, demonstrating how they managed to fool UFO believers.
Again, we're not trying to prove or disprove anything, but it's okay to be skeptical.
Okay then. Jim, thank you very much indeed for that. Jim Acosta there.
You bet.
Well, the role of the media in the flying saucer phenomenon is a very, very important one. I think it's very clear that in the United States, at the very least, that there were efforts during the very earliest days to try to get the media to basically dampen down expectations and dampen down public enthusiasm concerning extraterrestrial life and the flying saucer phenomenon. And this is actually documented. And ever since that, we have seen many, many examples of how the media doesn't really explore or doesn't really investigate flying saucer reports, and that various media organs have been bought out by the CIA. For example, the National Enquirer was actually bought out by a CIA asset who used it as a very clever way to debunk flying saucer reports by basically sensationalizing it, making it part of the kind of tabloid media, whereby serious media investigators would not do any research into a flying saucer report that had been in any way covered by the National Enquirer or these tabloids. So that was a very clever piece of psychological warfare, in my opinion, to try and get the mass media disinterested in the flying saucer phenomenon.
So it's a very, very complex issue, and the secrecy isn't that hard to maintain if you have this sort of infiltration into major institutions, media, and also the ability simply to float nonsensical stories out there. Because people hear the word UFO and extraterrestrial, they think somebody from a trailer park in West Virginia who's floated on board a spacecraft had sex with someone from Mars and claims they have a baby in an incubator, or just all kinds of nonsense. The truth of it is actually more interesting. The truth of the technologies and the fact that the extraterrestrial technologies are so advanced that they interface directly with coherent thought. Like we have coherent light in a laser, they have technologies that interface with thought, that interface with conscious mind, that their development of artificial intelligence that's integrated into these spacecraft is so advanced that they pick up on a directed. It's fascinating, and this is what we've been experimenting with, and the whole paradigm becomes a new paradigm of understanding the structure of the cosmos. But the most of the information that's out in the public on this issue has been a carnival of silliness, and that keeps most serious people sort of in the closet on it.
Is this the reason why so few scientists engage in the UFO subject? The fear of being associated with the silly side of the issue. Is this also why it's never commented on by astronomers or by space organizations such as NASA?
This is not just a simple civilian organization. There's a great military connection here. There's a lot of classified security clearances involved in being able to work at NASA. You can't just stroll in there. So these are people who fit a certain personality profile. That is, they know how to follow orders, they know how to keep their mouth shut, and keep their head down, and their career will do just fine. That's how most people are who live in a bureaucratic world. This is how secrets are kept. There are open secrets that are kept for years and years and years because people agree just not to talk about it. And I think that within NASA this is very likely the case regarding the UFO issue.
But like Dr. Edgar Mitchell, people retired from NASA have commented on the issue. Astronaut Gordon Cooper has told the world straight out about encountering a UFO at close range during his flight in the Mercury capsule in 1963. And before he died, he also stated, "For many years I have lived with a secret, in a secrecy imposed on all specialists in astronautics. I can now reveal that every day in the USA, our radar instruments capture objects of form and composition unknown to us."
I would like to believe that we could invite serious scientists into this arena because it will be changing the paradigm of science as we know it. We know that these craft are not traveling with fossil fuel gas, that there is a technology behind them, that maybe this technology could help the Earth and renewable fuels. If we could get scientists just to use that motivation, to look at the technology behind the craft, then maybe we could invite science to come in and change the paradigm of transportation, of electromagnetism, of all these really advanced technologies. But we need to invite them. I think too many are afraid of ridicule. Too many. I have encountered many that are curious but are not willing to go public. We're changing times now, and for the sake of our children, our grandchildren, and the future, some scientists are going to have to take the risk.
Well, it's my hope that we open this whole issue up. And as I have said frequently, we're at a point in history where we have to become a part of the neighborhood of inhabited planets, rather than like a neighborhood of a community, which we have not even acknowledged that community exists up until this point.
An event with the power to institute a global revolution in technology, communications, energy supply, environmental concerns, and even the way we regard ourselves and our fellow beings. A paradigm shift of unprecedented proportions, impacting nearly every part of our existence. Is this what we are facing? And will we have to rewrite our entire human history?
In the hallowed halls of national security agencies and the Pentagon, top military, top security people, the top people know essentially this reality, but the masses of people don't. And the people in authority, the elite as it were, the power brokers, have desperately tried to keep the lid on this thing because, Terry, it's not simply visitors from another planet or from another star or another galaxy. or even another dimension. It's not simply that. It isn't that simple. We've learned over the years that several of these intelligences have been involved with us from the beginning of human history, and the evidence has been collected that the human race literally is a hybrid race, and that some of these advanced intelligences, from wherever they're from, have been involved in genetically manipulating us as a species from the beginning of our history. Man is a hybrid. From a lower order, we've been genetically manipulated by advanced intelligences into what we are. Now that in itself is dynamite, for God's sake.
And this brings us to one of the most bizarre sides of this whole issue, the so-called alien abduction syndrome. It first came to public awareness in the early 1970s, when stories began to surface of people being taken on board alien craft after being rendered passive. Incredible stories were revealed, and the remarkable similarities between the stories is what has triggered the interest of researchers.
My colleagues and I have heard directly from thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of people over the last 20 years about their abduction experiences. And so we know that this is a very, very, very prevalent phenomenon throughout, probably throughout the world.
The first thing I recalled was seeing 3 fingers and a thumb on a hand come towards me to pull me out of the van. I was more than a little frightened. I was quite traumatized by it. I was very awake, sitting up, and had no reference for this. I was removed from the van. My friend remained asleep beside me. And as I stood at the end of the van, there was a being that I could not look at, a very tall, what felt very large and very tall being standing in front of me, but I was not able to raise my head to look up. On each side of me there was what I've since come to understand is referred to as grays, one on each side of me. My hands were hanging down at my sides, and they were, without touching me, with their hands underneath me, they were levitating me somehow off the ground, about 5 or 6 inches. I was fairly paralyzed, not able to look around. I could look down and see one at each side of me, and we began to move forward.
They go through a period where they kind of calm down, they're put on a table, and certain examinations take place, certain procedures. Very often there are areas of skin removed, leaving a little circular scar in depth, what you call scoop marks. We don't know what they do with this flesh, but it's taken. And there are often reproductive procedures which involve, with men, sperm samples being taken, and with women, needles which go in the abdomen or in the vagina, but we believe this has to do with harvesting ova.